Hello everyone, thanks for checking out the channel. If you like this video, please remember to like, and if you subscribe, be sure to comment below. I reply to every comment. Taking the night shift at any job comes with its own unique risks and challenges. But when that job happens to be as a night watchman at a cemetery, those risks go from tricky to downright terrifying. I learned that the hard way. I thought working the graveyard shift at Oakwood Cemetery would be easy. I just had to sit in the watchman's cottage by the front gates from midnight to 6 a.m., making an occasional round to make sure everything was quiet. The pay wasn't great, just minimum wage, but it seemed like an all-right gig for a high school senior trying to save up some extra cash over summer break. There hadn't been any incidents or vandalism at Oakwood for years. The place was located in a remote corner of town, far from any busy streets or neighborhoods. The most action it ever saw was around Memorial Day when people came to put flowers on graves. At night, I expected it to be dead silent. Pun intended. On my first night, the manager came by at 11:30 p.m. to unlock the gates and let me in. He was an ancient guy named Bert, who looked as old as some of the weathered tombstones. "Here's the keys and a flashlight," he told me, his voice gravelly from what was probably a million cigarettes. "Your shift starts at midnight. I'll be back at 6 a.m. to lock up." I nodded, excited to have my first taste of responsibility and freedom. As Bert drove away, I strolled through the open gates onto the neatly kept grounds. Rows upon rows of headstones lined the rolling hills like slabs of white, gray, and black teeth protruding from the earth. A huge marble angel stood watch over one of the larger family plots, her eyes downcast in perpetual mourning. It was a bit eerie, but I pushed away my unease. I had always liked creepy stories and movies, and this place looked like somewhere you'd film a late-night zombie flick. As I made my way past the stones and statues dotted with bird poop, I decided to have fun with my alone time among the dead. At midnight, I took up my post in the small cottage by the gates. It contained just a desk, a chair, a small TV, and a tiny bathroom. A plaque on the wall listed my duties and the cemetery rules. Number 1, arrive on time at midnight. Number 2, keep the gates locked. Number 3, let no one enter or leave until morning. Number 4, watch monitors for any movement. Number 5, report disturbances immediately. Number 6, make rounds every hour. Number 7, do not fall asleep on duty. Number 8, do not tamper with graves, flowers, property, etc. Number 9, turn away funeral processions. Number 10, contact police if threatened. Number 11, leave promptly at 6 a.m. Number 12, lock gates securely when exiting. Those seemed easy enough to follow. As I sat watching old reruns on the dusty TV, I felt ready to ace my first night. Just before 1 a.m., I remembered to make my first round. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped outside, sweeping its beam over the rows of graves. All was still. The only movement was the swaying of tree branches in the cool night breeze. Feeling pleased, I marked my watch and headed back inside to enjoy the rest of my uneventful shift. At 2 a.m., I was halfway through my second bag of chips when the power suddenly cut out. The TV went black and the overhead bulb flickered off, plunging the cottage into inky darkness. I sighed in annoyance. Of course, the electricity would randomly go out at night in a creepy cemetery. Because that was just my luck. I fumbled for my flashlight and flicked it on. The pale beam barely cut through the darkness inches from my face. Through the windows, I could see the moonlit shapes of graves stretching before me in hazy outlines. Sighing again, I pulled out my cell phone to text Bert the news. But my phone was dead too, even though it had been nearly fully charged. Now I was frustrated. I knew I should go check the breaker box to try resetting the power. Bert had pointed it out earlier. It was located behind the maintenance shed about 100 yards from the cottage. I really didn't want to stumble through a vast, pitch-black graveyard to mess with the breakers. But not having electricity defeated the whole point of a night watchman keeping an eye on things. Steeling myself, I left the cottage and started the long walk toward the shed. My flashlight's weak beam was consumed just feet ahead of me. I had to go slow, leaning forward with each step to ensure the ground ahead was clear. Anything could be hiding in those pools of blackness, fallen branches, uneven turf, puddles I could slip on. Or worse, my imagination conjured visions of freshly dug pits for me to fall into, corpses rising from the earth to grab at my ankles. Stop it, I scolded myself. It's just a busted breaker box. Nothing to freak out over. But I couldn't shake the prickly feeling that I was being watched from the surrounding dark. I swung my flashlight back and forth rapidly as I walked, willing more light to manifest to drive back the suffocating shadows. After what felt like hours, I finally glimpsed the boxy outline of the maintenance shed ahead. I hurried forward, half expecting something to reach out and snatch me before I got inside. But I managed to duck through the shed doorway unimpeded. My light revealed the electrical box on the far wall. I flipped the switch off and on a few times, but nothing changed. Crap. This meant calling an electrician and most likely cutting my shift short. As I turned to leave, my flashlight flickered. I smacked it against my palm a few times until the bulb burned steady again. The last thing I needed was to get stranded in complete darkness. As I exited the shed, I swept my light left and right. Immediately, I gasped. About 20 feet away stood a pale figure right in the path I'd walked just minutes before. Terror froze my blood. Had some corpse really risen from its grave to haunt me? I stood motionless, flashlight shaking in my hand. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was just a white pillar topped by a weeping angel statue. Feeling equal parts relieved and stupid, I laughed aloud at my racing imagination. Nothing sinister here. Just garden variety, cemetery statuary. Still chuckling at myself, I picked my way carefully back towards the cottage, avoiding other areas the treacherous dark might disguise. As the cottage came into view, I suddenly remembered I was supposed to make my 2 a.m. round of the grounds a while ago. Better late than never. I scanned the open area visible in the weak moonlight. No movement or disturbances that I could see. I swept my light over the more distant headstones which faded into the trees. Was it my imagination? Or did the beam catch something shifting behind one of the larger monuments? I stared hard, waiting for the shape to take form. After a long moment, I decided a branch or animal had momentarily tricked my eyes. Satisfied everything was normal, I turned my light away and came face to face with a hideous, eerily smiling cement cherub just inches from my face. I screamed and staggered back in shock before realizing it was a fountain statue. Heart racing, I gave a breathless, uneasy laugh. I definitely needed more sleep if decorations kept catching me off guard. I continued my circuit around the front half of the cemetery, finding nothing unusual. As I looped back toward the cottage, I pointed my light at my watch. 2:45 a.m. Over halfway done with this uneventful night. Feeling confident, I settled into the creaking metal chair and propped my feet on the desk. Without electricity for the TV, all I could do was stare out the dark window at vague shapes until morning light softened them into gentle hills rather than looming monsters in my mind. The next hour passed quickly. At 3:45 a.m., I dutifully got up for my next round. Maybe I should skip it, I thought lazily. After all, it wasn't like anything dangerous could get in or out of the locked gates. As my hand touched the doorknob, the cottage's overhead bulbs suddenly flashed on. I winced against the harsh glare. Hey, the power was back unexpectedly. I blinked in the brightness, relieved I could stop stumbling through darkness. Before sitting back down, I remembered rule number 6. Make rounds every hour. It was an easy enough job, even if unnecessary. I grabbed my keys and stepped outside, planning to walk the perimeter as fast as possible so I could get back to my TV shows. The cemetery looked much less threatening bathed in light. I made quick progress past the rows of stone sentinels standing guard. As I rounded a large granite memorial, I froze. My flashlight revealed a dark liquid streaking the face of the carved stone. Blood. Alarm coursed through me. I knew I should follow Rule 10 and call the police, but what if it was just a cruel prank? Cautiously, I reached out to touch the thick red stain. It was dry, hours old. Feeling uneasy, I continued on. Kids breaking in to vandalize would explain the power outage. As I neared the cottage, I noticed that the front gate stood partway open. What the? I specifically remembered locking it after Bert left. Panic rising, I broke into a run towards the cottage. Rule number 2, keep the gates locked. Someone was definitely here messing with me. I paused before darting out from around the last row of graves. Catching my breath, I slowly looked around the corner of the large mausoleum on the end. A dark figure stood facing the cottage under the flickering bulb. My pulse quickened. I couldn't tell if they were breaking in or had just come from inside. Either way, I wasn't confronting them alone. I ducked back behind the cold marble wall and fumbled for my phone. Please have enough battery to make a call. Suddenly, a loud snap sounded inches from my ear as something clamped down on my shoulder. I shrieked and spun around. A weathered statue of a robed man stood behind me, one carved hand clutching my shoulder with its stone fingers. I laughed in delirious relief. Just another statue. I must have backed up against it in the dark. Rubbing my shoulder, I pulled up the police station's number to report the intruder. The dispatcher said a patrol car was on its way but would take at least 15 minutes to reach the remote cemetery. Until then, I should lock myself in the cottage. I agreed, but first wanted to verify the front gate was closed to prevent the trespassers slipping away. Keeping to the shadows, I crept along the mausoleum until I could see the entrance. The wrought iron gate was sealed shut now. How? A flashlight's glow suddenly flashed across my eyes. I ducked down, heart pounding against the cold marble. Heavy footsteps crunched along the gravel path, coming from the same direction the figure had been. I held my breath, willing the guard to pass by, but the steps halted close to my hiding spot. "Hey, you!" a gruff voice called out, echoing off the tombstones. "I see you over there! Come out now!" Caught. With shaking hands, I switched on my cell phone light and stood up. As I turned to face the guard, the mausoleum beside me exploded in movement. Dark shapes launched themselves at me with outstretched arms. I screamed as bony hands grasped my neck, their strength overpowering. The figures pinned me against the mausoleum, claw-like fingers digging into my shoulders. This was no prank. These were corpses brought to life. I struggled violently, breaking the iron grip of one assailant. I smashed my flashlight against the other figure before staggering free. Without looking back, I sprinted for the cottage. The heavy steps pounded after me. I pushed harder, lungs burning. Suddenly, the toe of my shoe caught on something, and I went sprawling onto the cold earth. Ahead, the door of the cottage banged loudly. Strong hands seized me and flipped me onto my back. My flashlight revealed a deathly pale face inches from mine, dark liquid dripping from its eyes and grinning mouth. I opened my mouth to scream but tasted only dirt as bony fingers crammed soil down my throat. The foul earth was suffocating me. As the hazy night sky dimmed above me, my frenzied brain recalled rule number 7. Do not fall asleep on duty. But it was too late. The graveyard had claimed me for its own. Everything went black. A deeply unsettled feeling lingered even after I faded from consciousness. Suddenly, my body jerked awake with a violent spasm. I sat straight up, gagging and gasping for air that my lungs couldn't get enough of. As my vision cleared, I realized I was still in the safe, well-lit cottage. It took me a moment to conclude I must have dozed off and suffered an extremely vivid nightmare, but it had felt terrifyingly real. I could still feel the icy hands squeezing my neck, see those dead faces hovering over mine. Shuddering, I checked my watch, 5:58 a.m. The nightmarish shift was finally almost over. Soon Bert would be here to unlock the gates and let me return to the land of the living. I flinched as the desk phone suddenly rang, harsh and shrill. Warily, I reached for the receiver. "Oakwood Cemetery? How can I help you?" I said cautiously. The gravelly voice that answered turned my blood to ice. "Just making sure you're at your post," came the grim reply. "I'll be there soon, because tonight is your last shift." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the receiver slipping from my numb fingers and dangling above the floor. That voice, it couldn't be. I stared at the plaque on the wall. Under rule number 5 were 2 new words etched into the metal. Never snooze. My heart convulsed. I wasn't alone here. The spirits of Oakwood had marked me. I had to escape. I ran for the cottage door and tugged violently, but it wouldn't budge. I was locked in. As I pounded uselessly on the wooden door, the power died again, casting me back into total darkness. I sank onto the floor, clutching myself in silent terror. Loud scraping noises drifted through the blackness as the cemetery's occupants left their tombs to come for me. The night wasn't over yet, and I had nowhere to hide from the dead. As their eerie whispering voices surrounded the cottage, I closed my eyes and sent up a final prayer for my soul. Working the graveyard shift was the last job I'd ever take, but it would be my eternal resting place.